Thanks for staying with us. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa, as the African Union chairperson, has lauded the resumption of the trilateral negotiations between the parties to the Grand Renaissance Ethiopian Dam Project. The president has welcomed renewed calls for a resolution following a meeting of the African Union Bureau of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government held last month. The negotiations between Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia reconvened last Friday. Via Skype to talk to us from Nairobi is the Horn of Africa analyst, Dr. Hassan Khannenje. Dr. Hassan, thank you so much for making the time. What does the resolution of all these three countries mean for the African diaspora?
I think this will be one of the most important success stories, especially in the recent history of African diplomacy, in part just because of some of the issues that have been going on the continent, especially since the collapse of Libya and the subsequent events that followed in much of Africa, civil war, and of course today as we're talking about COVID. However, the issue, especially over this the Great Renaissance Dam, that promises to be a game changer for the economies of the region. At the same time, it poses great threat with regard to subsequent failures to actually resolve this issue that has raised the tensions within the larger Horn of Africa region. And without resolving this question of the dam, I think the continent may likely be engulfed in a situation of war, which of course none of us welcome. However, under the auspices of South Africa, which is the current chair of the African Union, I think what we are seeing is a move to try and work on a resolution where many others have failed. And frankly, it looks like both parties seem to be having a lot more confidence in the stewardship of South Africa trying to lead to a resolution as opposed to what other parties have tried before.
For the benefit of our South African viewers, just take us back to the origins of this conflict.
The origin of the conflict goes back actually years. For the longest time, Egypt has enjoyed a monopoly over the use of the River Nile. But it's also important to understand that historically, the Nile has been Egypt and Egypt has been Nile. There's no Egypt without the Nile. However, increasingly, as needs have arisen among riparian countries, especially countries such as Ethiopia, that depends or rather lacks electricity, and the dam promises to give them the much needed electricity to boost its economy. Building the Grand Renaissance Dam was not an option. It was something they had to do. Now, so you're having a contest between the desire for economic growth for Ethiopia, but at the same time, the need for survival of Egypt. Now, for more than 10 years, countries in the region have been trying to work on a resolution of the best way in which they can share this transboundary resource. However, because of disagreements over, for instance, the duration of filling the dam, the amount of flow that the water is going to be needed, especially for Egypt, the countries have been unable to reach a resolution, leading to the current stalemate we're having. And as a context, this is a moment, it's going to be a defining moment of African diplomacy. And so if South Africa succeeds to actually bring these parties to an agreement, I think not only is it going to bode well for African Union and the African continent, it's also going to bode very well for Africa's ability to solve its own problems, especially led by South Africa. And so what I think the continent is looking forward to is where many others have failed. South Africa, under the Cyril Ramaphosa, is going to lead the African Union in bringing a solution to the Horn of Africa region in a conflict that threatens to spill over and actually perhaps engulf the entire region, which will not be helpful.
Let's talk about the meeting expected on Friday. We're expecting for some technical and legal pointers on the broker deal to come out. It's been quite a complicated process, sometimes accusations coming out that Egypt had blocked the water spillage to the other countries. What can we expect to come out of the Friday document?
Yep. For conflict, of course, that has its origin from the 1929 treaty, then 1959 treaty, then of course the subsequent, agreements in the 1990s. We cannot expect it to take one day. Now we expect there are going to be lots of legal nuances and technical aspects with regards to undertaking it. Now the reason is because this region also faces drought, and in fact that has been a sticking point. So, for instance, Egypt would like some guarantees that they will be compensated in times of drought that lasts, for instance, for 5 years with regard to water. Now, Ethiopia, on the other hand, thinks, well, that is likely to affect its electricity supply because of the declining water in its dam. And so these are expected, and of course, they may have to take some time beyond what most people are expecting to completely iron them out. However, I think the overriding thing is that the countries reach a consensus that this is a shared transboundary resource that has to be exploited with mutual agreement of all countries, but not, of course, to be dominated by one country or the other. Even though, of course, on the side of Addis Ababa, they're appealing to sovereignty. But when it comes to transboundary resource, I think sovereignty can be limited because it's a shared resource. And so we expect that these technical issues and legal issues may take some time to completely iron them out. But ultimately, I think there's going to be a solution, because when you look at the option to a negotiated settlement, it is not something that is feasible. It's not something that anyone wants on the continent or in the region.
Dr. Khannenje, thank you so much for making the time this morning.
Thank you for having me.